welcome to Combat Thoughts. I'm Robbie.
I'm Lee.
And I'm Alex.
We're going to take a deeper look at culture and philosophy behind martial arts. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about the shaky start. Right. Now I think we're good to start with. Yeah, like we said, if you can just take us through, was Jits your first martial art? Did you get into something else beforehand? Kind of what's your background?
No, it wasn't my first martial art. So I started when I was 7 with karate. I guess the typical jiu-jitsu progression, right? So yeah, I did that when I was 7. Moved into taekwondo, and then eventually met someone who was teaching jiu-jitsu within taekwondo. So I got a little taste of it towards the end of high school. I did so I'm in the Air Force. So we did a combatives course there. That got me a little more of an intro. Did CrossFit for a while, and then I got tired of that, and I was like, all right, I want to do another group fitness. I really liked jiu-jitsu, so I got into that about 7 years ago when I moved to Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a long journey to it, but it became my favorite martial art pretty quickly.
How come jiu-jitsu and not going back to taekwondo or one of the others?
I think being a smaller person, I didn't see the longevity in the striking for me. So I like that jiu-jitsu seemed to have a little more longevity. I might argue a little bit with it being the gentle art. I've had a few injuries, but I guess compared to striking it is. And then I don't know, I just always liked the problem-solving aspect of it. I like the complexity and just the depth of all the techniques. So I just kind of just was fascinated with the problem solving aspect of it. And I think that's what really drew me in a lot.
So was the combatants course that you did at the Air Force, was it purely jiu-jitsu based, or it was more sort of general wrestling and elements of jiu-jitsu?
It's mostly jiu-jitsu based. Most of the armed services, it's primarily jiu-jitsu based. There's a little bit of other things in it, but that's the bulk of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess what we're really interested in is, and obviously don't talk about more than what you want to, but we're just interested in where the BJJ Safeguard came from, sort of what inspired you to do it, and then actually what happened with implementing it. So obviously I don't want to pry too much, but just whatever you want to talk about with it.
Yeah, so the idea for it, well, okay, so I'll try to figure out where to start.
Cool.
Basically, I've felt with assault, so many times when you see an accusation, a lot of people are like, well, innocent until proven guilty. Yes, that's true. Unfortunately, very few people are proven guilty because it takes so much evidence. And there just seemed to be this general, always shutting people down because there's no convictions and it's so hard to get a conviction. And so I just kind of felt this need, okay, there's a conviction. I can say affirmatively, this person was found guilty for sexual assault. And therefore, I have a little more of a platform to even say it without getting shut down right off the bat. So that kind of became why I felt determined for this platform for Safeguard. I just also felt a lot of the patterns that I went through are predictable. After I got out of it and learned more about how abuse starts and what narcissists typically do to get people into their circle, it was a very predictable pattern. And so I just felt if more people knew what this pattern was and understood it, then maybe less assaults would happen because people could get out of the situation sooner, before it was too late. So that was kind of the big part of the education piece for me was okay, I've learned the pattern now the hard way. I've seen a lot of materials that validate it. So how can I get the message out there to other people so women or anyone that's vulnerable to assault can recognize it earlier, and then anyone that could intervene could also recognize it earlier too. So I kind of saw a lot of that as people speak out. There's a lot of doubt, of course, but when you look back, like, okay, that person was getting them alone a lot. They were too close. They tend to be super friendly, way too much off the bat. Like, there's red flags that should hopefully maybe warn people a little bit earlier that something bad might happen.
Okay. And why? One thing I've kind of wondered is there's a big. It's almost quite stereotypical, or maybe it's just a sort of quite a repeated story within jiu-jitsu that this kind of thing happens, especially with instructors.
Yeah.
Do you think that is that well founded, or do you think that's a bit of a sort of just a general thing across society, or is it specifically like jiu-jitsu where this happens?
Mm, I think it's a little both. So I think it typically happens in a power dynamic. And so naturally, an instructor holds the power in the school. And so it's a more ripe environment to happen because of that power imbalance. Um, at least in the US, there's been a big uproar about it in the Olympic sports too, between coaches and athletes. You see it in the churches with priests and kids. Like, I think anywhere there's a big power dynamic, this situation can exist. Um, I guess in jujitsu, it's no different. But I just find it extra revolting, I guess, in a way that it happens because jujitsu is supposed to be that place that's safe and you learn how to keep yourself safer. And so they're really just, I feel, is less of an excuse for it to happen in that power dynamic because, like, you're telling people that this is safe and this is where they can empower themselves. And so they shouldn't be taken advantage of in that power situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you going to go, Alex?
I actually, no, I think what I had was going to ask was whether or not it's mostly these assaults take place with the professors, so to speak, rather than members. But I think you kind of answered that. I'm not sure if you've
Yeah.
you've heard of situations where it's not just based on that. It's also just pure just members doing similar types of things. Of course,
Yeah.
that's perhaps different from a power
It,
dynamic perspective, but
It is a mix. So we worked with this researcher who did a big survey last year, and I don't remember the exact statistics. I mean, there was a majority coming from black belts, proportionally, like there's a lot fewer black belts, but I think it was like something at 20% of black belts were kind of the perpetrator of it. It does definitely happen between members too, but I believe like that survey found that a significant portion of the time that member had like a rank over whoever they were perpetrating against.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you talked about patterns that people fall into. What is the typical? I've had a look through the Instagram page, but it'd be good to sort of summarize what those patterns really are for people to look out for.
Yeah. I mean, so the big thing is like gaining trust and isolating a person. So in jujitsu specifically, you might see that as like someone giving a lot of private lessons for free. Um, and it might be with like a particular demographic only, like women or children or another vulnerable group. Usually they start like texting that person a lot, usually pretty innocuous, like, hey, how's your day going? And it just turns into talking all the time, every day. Um, you kind of see it like they gradually push boundaries. So maybe at first it's just like hugging all the time, and then they just keep testing that boundary until it eventually becomes sexualized. Uh, and I mean, a lot of it's just kind of that isolation and building trust. Usually, like that person might have something that makes them insecure, like a significant life event going on, so that perpetrator will promise to be like that safe person for them that they can tell their thoughts to. They're generally pretty good at like making people feel validated and supported early on. So it just sort of establishes that trust. So then once they do start doing um, negative things, it's hard for that person to believe like, okay, but I trust them and they were this one person that was really there for me when I needed it. It's hard to reconcile the difference. And that's, I feel like, how people get kind of entwined so deeply into the abusive situations.
Mm-hmm. So what's interesting to me is the fact that so if it's usually some say it's a high percentage of people who have black belts that are the perpetrators, what are we doing wrong? What are the so they must have had previous professors. Now, assuming that those previous professors were um not sure if this is the right word, normal people,
Yeah.
but people who wouldn't do such terrible things. Um, um, how did they not identify these traits? Are they just they're just uneducated on these on the topic, and they just don't really know what signals to look out for? But you know, in jiu-jitsu, the big thing is you're almost if someone's a black belt under you, you basically know that person like it's your son or brother, right? It's
Yeah.
like almost. I mean, to an
Yeah.
extent, that's how the jiu-jitsu thing is a family, right? It's a family vibe, and and uh, and um, and being someone who you can rely on. So I just it's really interesting to me that no one can see those patterns and then do something about it, because if you give someone that platform of being a black belt, they've kind of become this they've got the platform, they've got that rank, and it's difficult to then dethrone someone from
Yeah.
that place.
Yeah. Uh, I don't know. I don't really have like a good answer for that because I don't know.
Mm,
Um, my suspicion is, or my guess would be like people really don't know the pattern. Um, I know I used to have the mindset because I just didn't understand how the court system worked. Like, unless someone's convicted, they really are innocent. Um, and when I like had to go through the process myself and looked at the statistics, like the statistics were 0.5% of people that perpetrate sexual assault are ever convicted. And so that was really eye opening for me because I was like, okay, well, I can appreciate now maybe how many people like did do this, but were not found guilty because of either evidence or like their victim just couldn't go through the process or the police didn't even start the process, or in two-thirds of cases like it's never even reported to begin with. And so I think
mm,
that kind of lends to it like, okay, well, people don't want to do anything until someone's convicted, and it's very rare that's going to happen. um, so I think part of it is maybe being willing to like take action on an earlier step. Like, okay, if
yeah.
you know one of your students is perpetually doing private lessons for free with certain types of people, but not other people, like maybe that should be questioned and if it's too fishy, like dealt with. Um,
Right.
I think another thing is people just not understanding um, the patterns. Like, I know for me, when I finally spoke out, everyone was super shocked that this is what was happening. And it kind of just, for me, after being through it, of like, okay, well, here's the pattern. Like, can't you all see this? But not everyone can or did. So there is that kind of like mental block, I think, too, for people because they are like viewing each other as family and brothers and really respect that person. It's very hard to then be like, okay, I've respected this person for 10 years and now I have to accept that they did something terrible.
Mm.
That's, I
Because
mean, it
it's
was
these
even hard
things.
for me, right?
I guess these things are quite secretive within the person. So
Hmm.
it's I understand what you're saying. It may be quite hard, even for someone who supposedly is close to that person, to not recognize these things.
Right.
Did you also, so I mean, based on your own experience, was there some sort of stigma around the fact that you were speaking up, or were people quite supportive? Because I feel like, especially in sort of male circles, it could be seen off as like, oh, you're overreacting, sort of thing. And
Hmm.
we've had a pretty heated conversation with Robbie and the Lee, who also does the podcast, about Faraz Sahabi's um,
I knew you were going to go there.
opinion about I have to um, opinion about having men doing jiu-jitsu with women, and kind of basically his viewpoint being that men shouldn't, or he thinks he wouldn't do jiu-jitsu with women because they bring trouble.
Have you seen this video? It went a little bit viral about Faraz Sahabi and talking about rolling
Uh,
with women.
I heard about it. I didn't watch it. I saw some of the like comments and headlines about it.
It
It
was
was basically,
infuriating.
yeah,
Alex brings it up frequently. He's so angry about it. But
yeah,
the gist is, he, well, obviously, kind of the figure that Faraz is within the community, and he basically says something along the lines of, men shouldn't roll with women because then they'll cheat on their wives and do so. Like, it's along those lines. It's like you'll have thoughts, then you'll cheat on your wife, and everything will go wrong. So he
Which I
doesn't roll
think,
with women and doesn't think any other man should roll with a woman.
yeah, exactly. And I think it then reinforces this problem of, then with when something does happen, it's
mhm.
almost as if it's like, oh, what are you on about? It's You're overreacting, and I think it's toxic. So I wanted to ask how your experience has been.
Yeah, yeah, I can appreciate that. Like, of course, like I didn't share with a lot of people when I first started talking about it, because he got to roam around free in the community for a year and a half before there was a trial. So I didn't talk to a ton of people about it. It did feel very stigmatized. Like I did have a number of close friends that were super supportive. I felt there was a lot of other people that just like either couldn't handle it or didn't know what to do with it, and it damaged relationships and friendships that I had. I know by the end of it, I kind of felt like it had cost me most of my friendships. I still had
Mm.
few people that were really close with me and being supportive, but I went from being like a very active competitor to just struggling to live, basically. It was a very stressful process, and so I think it cost a lot of friendships in that sense. Um, since I've like been open about it, I got a lot of support, but I do feel this kind of message to not talk about it because it is uncomfortable. I think there's this perception of like, okay, well, eventually it's going to make the sport look bad when there's so many people coming out that like, hey, I was assaulted, or hey, this happened, or hey, I'm being harassed. And I can understand that viewpoint, but I also want to like flip the script on it a little bit. Like, well, there's lots that we can do to make the sport safer. So why shouldn't we just focus on like what we can do to make the sport safer? Like, yes, we need to take all these cases seriously. I think there's a lot more than people talk about. And so rather than getting upset that people are talking about it, we should be upset enough that we're like want to make a change. But there is just a lot of that messaging. Like I've heard the rumors like, okay, well, Safeguard is making it so men don't want to roll with women. You know, of course I don't want that to be the outcome of what I'm doing, but I also think of like, well, what is it about women saying I don't want to be assaulted at my gym that makes people feel like, well, I shouldn't roll with women then.
Mm.
Well, what could you do then to just make it safer for women to be in the gym to begin with? But I think that comes down to a message of like, do people believe this is real, or do they believe that it's overblown and that women are making this up? Because unfortunately, there are going to be like women who make a false accusation. I think it's much rarer than what people think it is. But unfortunately, then it just perpetuates that type of thinking. Like, okay, well, here we go. Someone made an accusation. It's not safe for men to train with women.
See that? I find that odd in any case. Are you saying that people... So just to clarify, are you saying that people have said that about BJJ Safeguard? They've messaged you saying that it's making
Uh,
men not want to roll with women, or...
no one's like messaged that directly to me, but I've gotten like rumors that that's like some of the perception in the community is like it's threatening and not a positive. Um, but then I also just challenge like, well, why is it threatening? Like, why is someone demanding respect threatening, right? Um, so it's complicated, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess jiu-jitsu is always going to be complicated because there is quite a sort of close physical aspect to it, and it
Yeah.
is combat. I mean, you are
Yeah.
in a, it's a different sense of the word, but you are practicing assaulting someone. Like in a
Mhm.
way, it's in a different sense of the word. So
Right.
obviously there are going to be difficult situations, but what I find weird about if people perceiving BJJ Safeguard to do that is that your messaging's not like your messaging isn't stuff like, oh, when you're rolling with a woman, careful you don't put your hand here.
Yeah.
Like, it's not about that, which is, if it was that, I'd be like, well, yeah, then I'm going to be afraid, I'm going to be
Mhm.
concerned because it's chaotic.
Yeah.
Your messaging's about don't let people in authority socially isolate other people. And that's not about training.
Yeah.
Or even it's just like maybe you like the only people who should be afraid are people who are themselves maybe not even not socially isolating but giving lots of free sessions to women of lower belts. It's
Right.
a very small group of people. I don't know. I'm not really sure exactly where my question's going, but my thoughts are it seems weird.
Yeah. And I think it seems to be a very defensive attitude. Like when I hear about that type of attitude, I just sort of question like, okay, well, have you have you looked at the messaging and have you seen the mission? Because that's not what the goal is. The goal is to make it a safer environment for everyone, not just women. And I don't want to like push the mindset that like this only happens to women, it can happen to men. Even in the survey, we had a few instances of women have harassed men. So it's just like it's all about creating a respectful place for everybody to train safely, and especially for people that are coming in vulnerable states, because that's typically someone who joins jujitsu is there's the like elite athletes that are looking for a new sport, but the overwhelming majority of like come from something traumatic or have insecurities or know they have a lack of confidence and they're trying to change that. And so we should do everything we can to make sure there's an environment of preying on that just can't exist.
So what is it that maybe to move on to slightly more positive, what is it that people can do to, obviously there's looking out for the patterns, but anything else people should be doing actively to try and reduce this in the community?
Um, I think just having like a safe place for people to talk about it is huge. Um, the gym I was at before COVID, the coaches there knew my backstory, and so I just felt very comfortable like talking to them about anything that I was unsure of or felt questions about. They had like that open door policy that anything I had to say would be taken seriously. So I think that's going to be huge. It's like just opening up the door to communication. So many people are afraid to talk about it, and
Mm.
and for good reason. Like a lot of times when people do, they get attacked rather than supported. So I think the more like people can do to understand like how it happens and be willing to like have a conversation about it is going to be a huge first step. Um, Within the organization, our current project has been working on a code of conduct. And so what we see is like a lot of gyms have code of conducts regarding the basics like trim your nails, wash your gi, bow to the professor, respect your training partners. But there isn't really explicit guidelines on like what does that respect mean? Like what does harassment look like? So putting out like more explicit guidelines on what that respect looks like within the school. That's kind of been our big first project. I think our next project would be like helping create a process for schools to implement like a reporting process to the school. So I think like
Mm.
most places in the survey, we found most places don't have a code of conduct that deals with harassment. And then a lot of places don't know how they would report it if something were to happen. So I think having those two things as a start would be a huge change for a lot of schools.
Yeah, that sounds like a brilliant idea. Also sounds like something you could implement on even a safeguard website and be signed up as a gym, and then
Yeah.
use a sort of platform that you would create to make those sort of to 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 raise it, basically, to raise the issue.
So where is it you see Safeguard going from here? So you've got the code of conduct, and you're putting out the information on Instagram. Is there anything else you're working on, or where is it you see the group going? I don't really know what to call it. Organization.
Yeah,
Yeah,
organization that works.
cool.
Um, yeah, so I think the vision will evolve as we like continue forward. Like the current vision was in our next phase to have more advocates throughout the country and the world. So the ultimate vision is to have like I don't know, not sure to call it certification, but kind of like a pledge program where once we get all these products of like how you can create a safer school, those schools that implement it can be given like a badge or be
Yeah,
acknowledged that they've done this. Because in the women's groups, there's a lot of talk like, can't we have a list of these like offender schools or bad schools? That's not very legal, and it can be a slippery slope, right? Like, what determines who gets on the bad list, and then, there's a lot of consequences for being on a bad list, right? So
yeah,
I was like, "Okay, well, what about if we had a good list? And what if we
exactly. Yeah.
had these procedures and things that people could implement, and when they implement them, be like, okay, these people are on the good list because they did these good things to help make
Mm.
sure their school is safer." And I think even with all the good things in place, I don't in an ideal world, it would 100% prevent everything. I don't think that's, like, 100% possible because 'cause you're always having new people join, you don't know their backgrounds. But at least implementing things that's saying, like, "I'm doing the best we can to make this as safe as possible." Eventually, I would like to get to that type of phase where people can say, like, "Alright, I implemented everything that Safeguard recommended, and I'm committed to making my school as safe as possible."
Yeah, I agree. I the whole time I had in my thoughts, oh, it would be awesome to have a BJJ school that then says BJJ Safeguard
Yeah.
Certified or something.
Mhm.
It would be definitely ideal. Like you say, of course, it doesn't prevent everything, but I think it would make it so much easier. I think, especially also, I think it would make it more accessible to many women,
Yeah.
um, to see that, and then, oh, okay, like, of course, not everyone's going to know what BJJ Safeguard is straight away, but hopefully, they're keen enough that they will check out the website, check out the mission, and hopefully it will actually make jiu-jitsu more accessible, because I think it's an issue that I would imagine a lot of women have, is being a bit scared of entering the male dominated space, so to speak,
Right.
um and and having those sorts of certifications in place potentially could really open some bigger doors.
Yeah, that's my hope. Yeah, when I think of it, even some of the pushback I've received to the organization, like I try to think of it as like in a business sense, right? Like if we were to take the emotional tragedy out of what happens and just look at it from a business perspective, like I don't see what the harm is in making your school safer because it's just going to bring you more business eventually, right? So um, I think even from it's basically it's professionalizing the the sport and the school by implementing these things that just make it more of an environment that everyone can thrive in.
Sure. And do you think, it could, of course, your mission now is jujitsu, um, because that's directly related to yourself. But
Mhm.
do you see it being also potentially extended? Because I think I wouldn't think jujitsu is the only place where these things sort of happen in the sense of martial arts clubs. I would imagine that there are plenty of kickboxing gyms, taekwondo gyms,
Right.
karate gyms, and it's kind of actually kind of crazy that this type of organization doesn't exist. Um,
Yeah.
because you hear so many stories. So do you ever foresee also potentially, I mean, I know you probably don't want to get ahead of yourself too quickly, but
You're
I
right.
would think that that would be great for you to also extend that to other sports.
Uh, I mean, yeah, in a perfect world, that would be ideal. So there is something already in the US. It's what I modeled it off of is called Safe Sport. So it was driven by the US Olympic Committee after there was a lot of issues coming out with abuse in sport in the Olympic sports. And so I had early on when I started Safeguard spoken with somebody that works there, and she kind of helped me create this initial model for jujitsu. And because jujitsu is not an Olympic sport, it didn't fall under Safe Sports mission. And Safe Sport is actually largely funded by the U.S. government as well, by grants and all that. So it's there. It does exist in some extent for like taekwondo,
Mm,
wrestling,
okay.
boxing to extent. There, I mean, obviously, there's a lot more martial arts that it doesn't exist for yet. So ideally, yes, it would eventually be cover everything. But yeah, there's just a long ways to go, I guess. It's hard to think
Sure.
of that right now, but
What do you need to push the organization forwards? Like, what is it that's is it funding, or is it what is it that's standing in the way at the moment?
well, so the really difficult thing, so Safe Sport has the ability to sanction coaches because they have each sport has what's called national governing body, and so Safe Sport works with those governing bodies to investigate and deliver punishments or sanctions, recommendations through those governing bodies. You know, jujitsu doesn't really have a governing body like that. I think IBJJF is probably the closest. So probably to really have an impact, we would need like an investigative arm of the IBJJF that would be willing to say like, okay, we revoke the school's membership because of an investigation concluded X. Um, I don't I don't know how feasible that is in the future, and that's why I've kind of gone with this like good list where if, like schools are pledging a commitment to these policies, creating a safer environment, they're on a good list. But right now, I guess the the challenge getting there is funding. Don't have funding at the current moment, and just like time and people. Uh, right now, like I'm the founder, obviously, but I have a team, a small team, less than 10 people that are volunteering to help me. So we're still kind of working on like, I would like to get like some professional volunteers on the legal and psychological side. I'm
Mm,
kind of just kind of going off my own experiences for those. And then we're also trying to recruit like more male allies. Right now, my team's all female, but we're looking to get more men involved, and then also just like more endorsement from higher level jiu-jitsu people. So like we're kind of grassrooting this through Colorado. We just really need more black belts to be on board with a program like this.
And if someone did want to get involved, I mean, presumably message you at BJJ Safeguard.
Yeah.
But what is it that people are going to be? What is it you need people to do, sort of day to day?
So right now we've been working as like kind of committee style. So we'll come up with the projects such as we had with the code of conduct, and like a small committee works on those. And so people that want to get involved likely we get thrown on like a project committee to have like a scope project to work on, and then work on it that way. Yeah, we don't have a super formal structure at the moment, just since we're in an early stage, but that's kind of the big pieces that we're doing right now.
Yes. And so what's the next project you're working on?
So we've worked with the organization Roll the Same. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they're
Afraid not.
also based out of Europe, and so they're kind of tackling inclusivity from a broader sense. So we worked with them on what we had for the code of conduct a couple weeks ago. They had a great idea to expand that out to make sure we include like sexuality inclusion and racial inclusion. And so we're trying to find and partner with organizations to like firm up that part of our code of conduct. We also have a local school that's interested in kind of being like the leading edge for implementing. So we're working on setting up a town hall with them to sort of brainstorm more ideas from a school owner's perspective of like what is needed to help out schools and like what's the highest priority.
Okay.
Cool.
And in terms of, because I would imagine you need some form of funding. Is there some way for, can people donate to BJJ Safeguard, or is it not really that kind of non-profit organization as such at the moment?
Not quite at the moment. That's a work in progress right now. I'm hoping this year we'll have that nonprofit status so that people can donate to the organization. Yeah, right now it's just been like an educational board at the moment. But yeah, that's the next phase this year as well.
Awesome.
Cool. I don't know where else to go for this bit. Were there any sort of important points you wanted to talk about? And Alex, you got any big questions before we start closing it off?
Nothing coming to mind at the moment.
Any big points we've missed out you wanted to touch on before we close it off?
No, I think we hit the big things. Yeah, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you all bringing me on to talk about it. I think it's a really important message to get out to the community. So I appreciate you all taking the time to do this and being willing to push the message out.
Well, I think I'll speak for many people who probably listen to this. Is I think we have to thank you for being brave enough to basically speak out in the first place, and then being determined enough and having the will to create an organization, which I think is going to be really crucial. And I think it's really important because it's a serious problem within the BJJ community. So I think we have to, on behalf of me, Robbie, I'm sure many other people who listen, have to thank you for doing what you're doing, and please don't stop.
Great, thank you so much.
And yeah, I guess last bit is where can people find you? I know we mentioned the Instagram, but best to say it all at the end so people know where to get you right at the end of the podcast.
Yeah, so we're on Instagram at BJJ Safeguard, as well as Facebook. And then the website as well. It's bjjsafeguard.com.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please consider subscribing to the podcast and checking us out on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram under the name Combat Thoughts. We'll see you next time.